Welcome back to Baithak. In this episode today, we'll be discussing the recent incidents that happened in the MyType festival, and we'll also be discussing some of the issues that are currently being faced by the Darjeeling community. So recently, there was a festival which happened in Sukna, and it was basically an event hosted by a group of members, and basically a lot of performers were supposed to come and perform in this festival. Now, what exactly happened is that the attendees went to the festival, and I believe that the amenities were very bad. And the main highlight of the show, Sabine Rai, actually didn't show up for the festival, and it caused quite a lot of controversy. It caused quite a lot of row, and after that, a lot of more information came out as well, where the performers were not given adequate amenities. They didn't even have water to drink, and the tickets were quite high, and it made quite a lot of buzz that such a well-organized event, I'm sorry, not a well-organized event, but seemingly well-organized event had such a lot of issues. Now, I believe a lot has been spoken on this already, but I just wanted to mention it because I believe it shows a lot of trends which are currently happening in the community, and it's the trend of a lot of events which take place recently. Now, for an event to be managed, especially in the Gorkha Hill community, I believe a lot of certain extra attention needs to be done. And I believe a lot of other event managers have been able to do this in a very good way. There have been a lot of successful events and such a lot of recurring events as well, such as Pine Tree, which seem to have hit the mark about how exactly such events should be handled. Now, since we as the Darjeeling Hill community are quite rowdy in that nature, I believe that's the word we can use, where drinking and partying and essentially these events tend to get a lot of buzz, and it can be quite difficult to control a crowd, and it has been an issue in the past as well. A lot of clubs were closed down in Darjeeling as well because of these issues, and it seems that this will always be an issue. Now, I wanted to get into a little bit a depth about and try to understand what exactly this has been caused by. Now, what I feel is that the Darjeeling Hills and the Darjeeling community has always had this affinity towards enjoyment and partying. And that is not essentially a bad thing. Of course, every now and then we need to rest and relax, and we need to have a good time so that we can understand what exactly life is about, and we can also take a break from the monotony of life, the struggles of life, and it always helps to take a step back and just enjoy for a few days. But what seems to be the issue is that this has been more rampant in the past few years, and I believe this has been a trend not just in the past few years, but actually in the past few generations. What exactly seems to happen is that we've inherited this party culture, and I believe it's because of an escapism that is inherent in our community itself. Now, as I said before, partying is not obviously a bad thing, but as the Buddha said, everything needs to be done in moderation. And if there is too much of a certain thing, it can cause issues. And I believe that the recent events and the rise in such events is just one facet or one symptom of this underlying issue that the community is currently facing. Before our generation, it was rock and roll. Before that, it was basically just drugs and just enjoying chang or tongba at your local bhatti. But currently, it seems that with the advent of materialism, with the advent of Western influences, this has resulted in the latest corroboration of this symptom, which is seemingly the events which take place. Now, this, I believe, within itself is not an issue, but what seems to be the issue is that we tend too much towards these issues. And obviously, I don't want to sound like a bore saying that partying is always a bad thing, but too much of it and too much heavy reliance on this has caused a lot of issues. And I feel it's just an escapism from the actual real issues that are currently being faced by our community. We don't really want to face those issues. We don't really want to look at those things. We don't even really want to think about these things. And such a lot of escapism by the entire community itself, I believe, has led to the partying. And enjoying, which has really been ramped up in the past few years. Now, I believe this is going to be an ongoing trend, and there isn't really a lot that can be done, in fact, about this as well. And the youth, of course, being the youth, will always have a tendency to enjoy and party. But I feel like this is an issue worth discussing about. And the underlying issue, especially, is something that worth and merits discussion. So I know I started off on the wrong foot and I started off on a little bit of a grim issue. And for those of you thinking that it's going to get better from here, I do apologize. It's actually just going to get worse. So for better today, I actually wanted to discuss on the issues that the Darjeeling community is facing. And I believe that there are a lot of underlying issues. But I just wanted to look at a few communal issues that we seem to be facing as a community together and how it's really been affecting. And it's something that I feel very deeply about, and this is something I see on an everyday basis as well. And I feel it's very important that we look into these things and actually sit back and understand why exactly these things are taking place, because they are very subtle things which happen very slowly and gradually, but it's slowly reaching to a point where it's causing a lot of issues, and I feel it merits a looking into. Now, the first point that I wanted to look into was materialism. Now, materialism by itself is, of course, a vice and is considered a vice by a lot of communities in the world. And a lot of religions are very against it as well, and for a good reason itself, because looking at materialistic things and being materialistic by nature and having a sense of worth on materialistic things or things in general is a bad thing. But I feel there is a lot of merit to it as well. I myself enjoy a lot of good things. I myself enjoy buying a lot of good things. And of course, some once in a while you want to have good things so that you can feel good about yourself and you can actually have a sense of comfort in your life and actually feel a sense of achievement as well. A lot of people use materialistic things as a benchmark for the achievements that they've had. Maybe you've just graduated college and you get yourself a good materialistic thing to remember it by. And I feel that holds meaning. It inherently is a good thing. But of course, anything in moderation is a good thing. But when you overdo it, that essentially causes problems. And I feel currently materialism in the Darjeeling community has been reaching a tipping point, essentially, where it's been causing a lot of more issues than the ones it's actually solving. Now, essentially what is happening is that I personally feel that a culture of showing off has really hit hard the Darjeeling Hill community. Now, it becomes very difficult to actually understand this and actually look at it as well, because it's something we see on a regular basis and we've actually, I feel, to a certain sense, become desensitized to it. But I'm sure all of us, if we take a little bit of a harder look at the interactions we take place on a regular basis, we'll see how materialistic we slowly become. Suddenly, everything is about just showing off. Suddenly, everything is about just getting something more expensive than the other person. Phones are no longer a utilitarian thing, but they've become a symbol, a status symbol of showing off. It's the same with cars, it's the same with bikes, it's the same with a lot of other things as well. And of course, as I said before, it's not always a bad thing. Of course, if you have the means to do it, then buying something good for yourself and having a better life and getting yourself a little bit of more comfort and good things is not necessarily a bad thing. But I feel that the motivations to acquire these things really play a lot of essentially an important role in materialism itself. Now, I feel that we're actually reaching that tipping point where we are no longer buying good things for our comfort, but we're actually buying things just to show off, just to show our neighbors, just to show our families, or just to show our friends that we're actually doing well or we're doing better than them. And it's just that, and it's slowly even becoming a competition that a certain person buys a certain item and you want to buy an item which is better than that, and it's slowly becoming a competition, and it's getting to the point where it's getting a little bit of toxic in nature. Now, to give you a certain example of this, I would like to take a community in particular as an example. Now, as you all may have known, the biking community in Darjeeling has really grown in strides in the past few years or the past few decades. And it started off very innocently, let's say. And it was started off by a few of these people who really enjoyed the machinery, who really enjoyed the thrill of the engineering, who really marveled at these machines, which were really works of art in general. And they enjoyed the thrill of the speed, they enjoyed the escapism it provided, where you could just get on your bike and just go for a ride and go for a trip, and then just, and it is something beautiful, of course. And at its core, the biking community still has that to this day, where there are a lot of groups of riders who go on rides constantly, and they take care of their machinery very well. They respect it, and a lot of issues have been not caused by them, but there have been a lot of issues in the materialistic aspect of it. Slowly by slowly, gradually, what happened was that the bike started less becoming a machine to be admired, and it started less becoming a means of joy in your life, but more as a status symbol. It started becoming about who has the better bike. It started becoming about who has the more expensive bike. It started becoming about, who has better equipment on their bike, or who's getting the newest exhaust, or who's getting the newest guards, or things like that. And slowly it even became an entry chip into certain communities. Certain communities and groups would not allow you to be members, and it started becoming a status symbol essentially. And ultimately, I feel it's heading in a bad direction. Now, of course, it's all not bad. There's a lot of people who are still enthusiastically following the biking culture, and I feel overall the biking culture has done a lot of good. But I feel that the materialism has seeped into it as well, and there are a lot of other aspects. It's not just biking. I've seen the same thing happening to hiking and trekking as well, where once upon a time it used to be about just escaping into the woods and escaping into the mountains and enjoying the nature of beauty, the beauty of nature. And it was just about an escapism from civilization itself, where you wanted to spend a few days in the wild and just enjoy and see what you can do with your own hands, and not having to rely on the comforts that civilization provided. But now it's slowly creeping in. Materialism is slowly creeping in, where it's no longer about that, but it's more about, how many hikes are you going per year. It's about how families are using it as a status symbol, that, I just bought a new tent, and I just bought so and so equipment to go on a trek and to go on a hike, or a new fishing rod or something like that, of that nature. And of course, there is the nice aspect of it as well, where of course, if you are an avid trekker or a hiker, you would want good equipment, you would want good hiking sticks, you would want good stoves and good camps. But essentially, it's becoming less about that and more about the showing off aspect of hiking and trekking as well. And this, I feel, is a sad development which is currently going on in our community, and it needs to be looked into. It needs to be understood, especially first and foremost. I think we all need to understand how exactly it is happening, because as I said before, I think the progress towards materialism was so gradual, was so slow, that most of us became desensitized to it, and most of us don't even realize when we are doing it. And it speaks volumes. It speaks volumes about the kind of culture we are becoming, the kind of community we want, and it speaks volumes about the ideals that we want as a community as well. Or rather, I would say it speaks about the lack of ideals that we have, where we have to rely on something like materialism to actually gain purpose. And I feel that the saddest aspect of materialism is currently in the schools. And I did do a article on this previously as well, which I will link to below, and you can give a read through of that as well. But it basically started because I was having a conversation with a few of my teachers and a few of my family members who are teachers in schools in Darjeeling, and they all had a similar tangent to speak about, and the same issue that they wanted to speak about, how the school culture is becoming materialistic day and night. And like, it's become to the point where it's become extremely toxic. I remember when I was in school that there was a certain aspect of materialism. Like, but that's just how kids are. And of course, there's going to be a certain aspect of that always, and it's not going to be completely removed. Of course, someone's going to have a better penciling kit, or someone's going to have a better pen, and you're going to envy that. And that aspect of it is always going to be there. But now it's slowly becoming a competition. It's slowly becoming toxic, where even small kids who are in nurseries or who are in the primary schools, they are also being forced into it, and they don't essentially realize what exactly they're being forced into by their parents. Where during birthdays, it's no longer about just enjoying a couple of sweets, it's about who's bringing the most expensive sweets, who's bringing the better goods, and who's actually hosting the best parties, who's actually has the best outfit. I believe a lot of schools follow the trend of where on your birthday you're allowed to wear a fancy dress, and that itself has also become a status symbol essentially. And I personally don't blame the parents so much as well. Of course, they too have essentially a responsibility at a certain point, where if the rest of the community is doing the same thing, and if you don't provide that for your kid, then your kid is going to be ridiculed, and it's going to cause issues in their school life as well. But the whole atmosphere has become such that it's become untenable to a certain extent. And it's sad to see, it's very sad to see how these kids who just hopefully are very innocent and don't even realize what materialism essentially is, are being forced into this environment of where they have to constantly compete with each other. And just imagine when these kids grow up and they've essentially been bred in this environment of materialism, when they grow up and become adults later on in life, they're going to be very materialistic in their outlook, and they're going to essentially have that chip on their shoulder always, that I want to be better, I want to have the better things. And of course, it's not such a big issue for those families who have the means to provide them for. But when you talk about lower middle class families and lower income families who don't really have the means to provide that, it's going to become a big issue later on. And I feel that's a bad thing. We should not be a community which is promoting that. But essentially, we are slowly transitioning. It's not too late. I'm not saying that we've reached a tipping point where everything is bad and all hell has broken loose. But if we can nip it in the bud, it's still in its infancy. The issue is still in its infancy. And if we can nip it in the bud and essentially try to look at it from a very positive perspective and see how exactly these things are affecting, what the underlying causes are, and if we could slowly make steps to remove these aspects, especially from the schools, especially from areas where materialism should have no role, then I think we can progress forward. Because the modern age is such that materialism is always going to have a hand in things, and capitalism, living in a capitalistic society, it becomes almost impossible not to be materialistic. And as I said before, I personally don't think materialism is a bad thing. There are a lot of positive advantages and positive facets to it as well. But when it's happening in a bad thing, and like I said before, I think the main differentiation between it being a good and it being an evil is the intention by which you do it. And the second point that I wanted to talk about is a little heavier, and I actually didn't want to talk about this such early in my podcast, but I feel it merits a discussion at least. And it is the lack of morals and a lack of family values that is currently slowly, again, it's not such a big issue currently, but I feel it's slowly tiptoeing towards it becoming a big issue. Now, what am I talking about? What exactly am I talking about when I say family values and morals? Now, I think with the advent of Western influence, I think with the advent of globalization and how I spoke before, where we've actually let go of our community's ideals, and then we've actually hopped onto the Western influences and Western ideologies. What happened as a result of that is we started looking at the traditions of our own community in a negative light. And that actually caused a little bit of an issue. Now, there are a lot of positive growths which happen due to this as well. So I do not want to thrash the Western influence completely, but I do want to talk about how it has led to a slow, gradual breaking down of the traditions and morals of the inherent Gorkha culture. Now, first and foremost, I want to talk about the dating culture and how it has slowly become more and more toxic, and it's slowly getting to a point where it no longer makes sense, because essentially during a young age, when you're in school and when you're in college, it makes sense that you want to have a lot of options, you don't really want to stay committed, and you don't really want to get into a relationship which is going to last you for the rest of your life. And of course, you're too young to understand, you're too young to actually get into what exactly a commitment is. You're too young to even understand what commitment is at that age. So, of course, relationships which are in the school time and in the college time are going to be more fickle in nature, are going to be what we essentially call puppy love. And that is okay, but I feel a lot of people don't grow out of it, and a lot of people don't understand what exactly it is causing and how exactly it is affecting their everyday relationships. Now, at a certain point, you're going to have to start getting serious. At a certain point, you're going to have to start looking at it from the basis of finding a life partner, because at the end of the day, that is what dating is. You're essentially shopping for a colleague and a partner who's going to last you for the rest of your life, who's going to be there for you, and who's going to show you that life is better lived when you have a companion. And I feel that is the end goal, right? But a lot of people have lost sight of that. And I feel that is because Western influence and Western ideologies have really thrashed the institution of marriage. And they've really looked at marriage and seen it as a non-essential thing, or basically attacked the main three ideals of marriage. And now, when I talk about the main three ideals of marriage, the main three ideals of marriage I personally feel are monogamy, procreation, and solidarity. Now, basically, what it means is that a marriage needs to be everlasting, a marriage needs to be monogamous, and a marriage needs to essentially end up in a situation where you're having kids. I feel these are the three main facets of what a marriage should be. And all three of them have been attacked. Now, I do respect the decision of a lot of people not to have kids and not to essentially want kids even. But what I don't respect is that if you're getting into the institution of marriage, you need to understand that it is till death do you apart. I don't think that there should be a very easy reason to get out of it. And of course, it is monogamous. Just because you're not in a marriage yet, but if you're ending up in a situation and you're wanting a situation where you're eventually going to marry that person, I feel that monogamy is very, very important. And I feel that due to Western influences and due to the Western ideologies, cheating has become very accepted, and it's become, even to a certain extent, glorified in our society currently. And that's a bad thing. That's a very bad thing, because it brings a sense of deterioration within the family structure. Now, the reason why I'm so vehement about this, why I'm so passionate about this, is because this is the generation which is going to grow up. This is the generation which is going to have families in the future. And these families are going to be the building blocks of the community that we are looking in the future. And we need to understand that a community is only as strong as its family unit is. A family unit needs to be unbreakable. It needs to have a strong bond. And the main bond which keeps a family together is the relationship between the husband and the wife. If they don't have a monogamous relationship, if they don't have that commitment where no matter what, no matter how situations go bad, we're going to support each other. And if that aspect of it is not there, then I feel we're headed towards disaster. And I'm, in fact, quite scared about the future if this is the direction we're headed, because I do understand that certain situations demand it, that certain situations are so horrible that a divorce is the last answer. And of course, I'm not saying that there should be zero divorces, but what I'm talking about is that you need to understand, I feel, what exactly you're getting into. And before you enter the situation of marriage or the institution of marriage, I feel you need to really understand what exactly you're getting yourself into, and then make a commitment and then see it through. And I feel that if two people actually do that with the best of intentions, then nothing can stop them. No bad situation, no horrible situation will be able to destroy that marriage. Because at the end of the day, if you remain monogamous and if you stay committed, and if you are able to have a few kids on the way as well, then I don't think anything is going to be able to stop you. Of course, there are going to be financial hardships, there are going to be an n number of issues that you're going to face throughout your marriage, but I feel that it is something to look forward to. It is a beautiful journey that you can undertake, and I feel we've kind of lost sight about that. And I know I've been going on a rant for this entire episode, but these are just some things that I really wanted to talk about. And these are certain ideals which are very close to my heart. And at the end of the day, this podcast is about these ideals and how we can safeguard them in our community and how we can use these ideals to essentially bring our community up. So I thank you very much for listening. I thank you all very much for watching, and Godspeed to you all.